Welcome, everybody, to Future of Beauty Unfiltered. I am your host, Hannah Cook, Head of Growth and Innovation at the Pull Agency. And today we welcome back a very lovely, familiar face, Sarah Carolides. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Hannah. It's lovely to see you again.
I know, it's so nice. I literally just said before we started recording your episode 22, and I think you were 4 or 5. So it's just amazing how many things have changed. But for anyone that doesn't know, this week we have the absolute privilege of talking to one of the UK's top functional medicine and nutrition specialists with over 2 decades of experience. Helping and supporting people with nutrition and health problems. Sarah has changed countless lifestyles across the UK and worldwide. You also work with numerous leading companies across the UK in their workplace wellness programs, which I love. And your approach around working with doctors and consultants, your secret weapon is a whole body approach, actually, that embraces everything from food, hydration, sleep, exercise, stress, and even organization, which I always say, tidy space, tidy mind, personally. But
Yes.
not only that, you are also Zuki's head of nutrition, leading on key health conditions such as menopause in the workplace and the importance of vitamin D, which is obviously what we were talking about last time when it came to the connection between gut and mental health. I still send that podcast to anyone that is prepared to listen.
Oh, it's so key. Everything comes down to the gut, everything.
It really does. But your actual career is anchored in wide-ranging science qualifications. So both undergraduate and postgraduate science degrees from the University of Cambridge, and have also been awarded diplomas with distinction from both the Institute of Optimum Nutrition and the Centre for I can never say this word, Integrative Sports Nutrition.
Yes.
You have just done so much. You also work really closely when it comes to with dermatologists. So I know you have a lot of passion when it comes to rosacea. We spoke about gut health. We spoke about eczema, particularly in children. There's just so many things that you can touch on. But today, I am I want to say buzzing. That's how actually excited I am to talk about the benefits and impact of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting has been something that obviously has been around for a very, very long time, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say in the last couple of years has become a little bit more faddy. It's definitely got a bit more awareness. There's a dialogue going on about it for sure. But actually, I think still to this day, even though lots of people are talking about it, whether it's kind of the 16-4 or the 12-hour, or there's all these different ones based on body types, and but for people that haven't heard about intermittent fasting, what exactly is it?
Well, it's really interesting because you're absolutely right.
Dropping coasters everywhere. Go on, carry on.
It's really interesting because you're absolutely right. People have been fasting since the beginning of time. And I think almost every major religion has some kind of fasting element in there, whether it's Lent or Ramadan or whatever. Fasting has been there for those kind of social or cultural reasons, but also as health. The whole starve a cold, feed a fever. Is it the other way around? Feed a cold, starve, whatever. Fasting for health is
feed
kind
a cold,
of
starve and fever.
That's the one. Has been, which is not necessarily correct, but fasting has been there for health reasons as well. However, what's happened the last few years, people have started to actually research benefits of fasting, and they're finding all sorts of interesting things. So there's two main types, and you touched on both. There's intermittent fasting. It's a generalized term, and it describes cycles of either restricting the number of hours when you eat in the day. So that's the 16-8 or the 24 or whatever you want to do. So that's the number of hours that you eat, but not necessarily what you're eating. Or the other type of fasting is when you restrict the calories, and that can be for a couple of days a week or a 3-5 day fast, something like that. So you've got either time or you've got calories, and both of those have benefits and possibly some drawbacks as well. But now we've put a name on it. We've said intermittent fasting. So it's basically reducing time or calories intermittently is what it comes down to.
In the sporting world, a lot of PTs talk, well, all PTs actually talk about if you want to lose body fat, you've got to be in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
What's the difference between living in a calorie deficit to lose body fat versus the calorie deficit fasting that you're talking about? Or effectively, are they the same thing?
No, they're not the same thing. Because what happens is the body uses glucose as its primary energy source. And as long as it's got a supply of glucose, either because you're eating regularly or there are some glucose stores in the liver and muscles as glycogen, once it's used all those up, there is a switch that takes place to burning fat. Once there's no more glucose left, the body will switch over and burn fat. This is something called ketosis. So if you are restricting the hours that you eat, the body is going to be more likely to switch over into fat burning. If you were just restricting the calories that you eat, it's not necessarily the same effect, because when the body is digesting and using up the glucose, that goes on for a certain number of hours, then it can switch to fat burning. So it's basically, the time is going to be more effective than just restricting calories. The other danger that you've got with restricting calories is that if you do it too much, the body thinks you're starving, and then it's going to reduce the metabolism and cause all sorts of problems and make it harder. So this is why intermittent fasting, reducing the number of hours, can be more effective than just reducing calories.
And so let's talk about, actually, you've touched on kind of ketosis, storing fat. You've obviously got two types of fat as well. You've got your visceral, which is obviously kind of your more dangerous fat that sits all around your organs. And then you've got your subcutaneous, which is kind of more on your limbs and the external areas. Or as I like to say, live in my bingo wings. But when you talk about intermittent fasting, most people think weight loss when they hear that.
They do.
Is that the main purpose of intermittent fasting, or actually is there more to it?
Well, there's a difference between purpose and consequence. So I think, yes, most people think of fasting as a way to lose weight, but actually I will often ask people to start intermittent fasting, especially the time one, because it's going to have effects on their digestive system. It's going to have effects on their immune system, possibly brain health. So,
wow.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, there's more research going on, but there's some interesting stuff coming out of California there. So I guess purpose, yes, people do it to lose weight, and it's proven very effective, especially for women over 50. Intermittent fasting seems to be much more helpful than just reducing calories.
Why is that?
Why is that? I'm not honestly sure. There is definitely a link with the menstrual cycle. When women are still menstruating, there are certain times of the month when fasting is going to stress the body too much. So I don't know the actual answer. Maybe it's giving the body more time to repair. The idea is it's giving the body a rest when it can actually repair. So I think it's probably something to do with that. But anyway, so back to your question, the purpose, yes, is to lose weight, but the consequences actually are much more far-reaching than that.
So let's talk about the positive impacts of intermittent fasting outside of weight loss. What impact does it have on your body? And then, also, I know this sounds really silly, but how do you get it right? How do you know what's the right thing for you? Because everyone's so different. Like we were saying before we started recording, consumers nowadays want, I'll put myself as an example. Yes, I obviously work in the industry, but I'm still a consumer, and I am obsessed with this search for wellness and what is the right thing for me at age and stage of life. What my body responds to in my mid-30s was not what I wish what my body responded to in my 20s. And so as soon as you enter then perimenopause and all of these different elements of life where more changes are going on, what are the positive benefits to intermittent fasting in general, and how do you know which is the right one for you?
For you, yeah, really key question. So let's start with the digestive system. I always want to start in the gut.
Yes.
There's a procedure that happens in the gut called the migrating motor complex. It's basically like a housekeeper that sweeps through the intestines and clears things out. It's actually an electrical wave. It stimulates muscle movement and sort of pushes any waste or food particles, excess food particles, out of all the little nooks and crannies through the intestines. Now, it only works when we're not eating. It starts about 2 or 3 hours after a meal. It takes up to 2 hours to complete a circuit, and then it just keeps going. It restarts until we eat again, when it's switched off immediately.
Right.
So if you're digesting, that cannot happen. Every time you eat, every time you snack, it will stop that. But if you don't do that, if you have this kind of period when you're not eating, the migrating motor complex can work really efficiently. So anyone with leaky gut, anyone with digestive issues, giving them that long break in between meals, and that can be a really nice 12 or 14 hours or even more overnight, can really help with their gut health. I have used it on so many clients over the years, and it just gives the gut the time to heal the mucus layer. It also changes the microbiome, the collection of bacteria we have in the gut when you're fasting. You lose some of the less beneficial bacteria and grow more of the beneficial ones, the helpful ones. So it helps with the microbiome, it helps with the mucus layer, it just helps repair the gut. So that's number one, the digestive system. Mm-hmm. Number two is all about the cells themselves. The body is very clever. When it thinks you are not getting enough food, or when you haven't fed for so many hours, it goes into something called autophagy. I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to say autophagy.
I've heard autophagy.
Yes, autophagy. There we go. Okay. What that means is that the body removes damaged cells and regenerates new healthy ones. So what the body is doing, it's thinking, okay, she hasn't eaten cake in a few hours, so I need something. So I'm going to go and start digesting some of those old damaged cells. So it's really very clever. It eats the bad cells
Praise on the
and
weak.
tissues.
Praise on the weak.
That. Hannah, that is an awful way of thinking. I'm saying the body is so clever. It's so clever. It starts digesting damaged and old cells.
Absolutely.
Think about that. It actually starts healing itself. So the body sort of adapts and it gets stronger. It's the body's process of recycling its own damaged tissue into usable energy during times when food is not present. The other thing that happens is growth hormone rises in order to protect the muscle and the bone. It switches into a more efficient fat burning mode, I suppose. So there's that cellular repair as well. So you've got the digestive system, you've got cellular repair. Studies have also shown that, have you heard of stem cells? Mm-hmm. Stem cells are kind of the master cells that you form in the bone marrow and things, and then they can go off and be all sorts of cells, types of cells around the body. They can be a skin cell, a liver cell, whatever. They all start as stem cells. Research has shown that during periods of fasting like that, stem cell regeneration happens a bit faster. So there's lots going on. And also the immune system. If somebody's got some sort of chronic inflammation, in a fasted state, you break down a significant portion of white blood cells. So anyone with sort of chronic inflammatory problems, that can really help as well. So there's lots going on underneath.
So actually, if you look at it from all the different areas that it affects, someone that struggles with their health should be potentially considering intermittent fasting as a starting point, while kind of seeking advice from whoever they're kind of under consultation with for that. Because like you say, it's gut, you mentioned kind of the brain as well. So there was Diary of a CEO. There was Dr. Mindy Peltz. She's very much an advocate of menopause and fasting and all these kind of things. And she was actually, you mentioned stem cells, saying that there's been some research recently released in America where they did intermittent fasting on cancer patients. You're nodding. You've seen it, yes.
Yes, I have. Well, breast cancer, that's right. There was one study that there were women and they fasted over 12, 13 hours at night. And the conclusion was that increasing nighttime fasting it was improving their blood glucose levels and decreasing their breast cancer risk, if that's the one she's talking
Yeah.
about. I remember. Yeah.
She was also talking about people going through chemotherapy and how actually, obviously, when you go through chemotherapy, it effectively nukes your immune system because
Yes.
it can't differentiate between certain cells. And the patients that were intermittent fasting during their chemotherapy left their end of chemo with a higher level of immune system than the people that didn't, because their stem cells were able to regenerate faster. So there's loads of things.
There really is. And there's lots of, I mean, going back to ketosis, there's lots of research. Cancer cells, this is very basic and very simplistic, and there's a lot more nuance than this, but cancer cells feed off glucose. So the whole basic theory there is that if you starve the body of glucose, then the cancer cells are going to have a much harder time to grow. So
glucose and sugar in general, I was talking to a fertility consultant actually a couple of months ago, and he was very passionate about sugar and kind of said in his view, in about 5-10 years time, they'll be able to prove that sugar is worse for you. This is his words, not mine, guys. Worse for you than smoking and alcohol combined. Because he is so adamant, and that's a big statement, I know, but he is so, and that's not saying, by the way, guys, you should do either of them, but but he, the impact when it comes to fertility and actually helping your body, and it's a challenge, right? Because you do need some element of
course you do,
but it's the right sugar, and I think this is half of the problem. So again, when we talk about, let's go back to intermittent fasting for a second, or even a calorie deficit. Sometimes there's this perception of, there's so many PTs online now. A calorie deficit is a calorie deficit. You can eat what you want in between. That's just not the case. Like,
no, it's really not.
And this is part of the problem. There's so many conflicting messages. So when someone's looking at intermittent fasting, some people are going, okay, well, if I don't eat, for 16 hours a day, and then I have my window, but I can only eat for X amount of time, I'm just going to eat McDonald's and I'm going to eat chocolate and cake. And it's kind of like, well, it's defeating the point of actually what intermittent fasting is going to help you achieve. So let's talk about the break in between. What should you be focusing on if you want to look at doing intermittent fasting? What should you be doing when you can eat? Because there's some statistics that say actually one of the first things that you should be eating is fiber, versus some people say the first thing you should eat to break a fast is protein. Like, how does that work when you come back out of a fasted state?
Yeah, again, I think it's the two types of fast, and you're absolutely right. If somebody is in their eating window, eating rubbish, McDonald's and cakes and whatever else, then there is absolutely no point, because that will harm the gut. It will undo any good that you've done by giving yourself a gap. So what you eat in the window is crucial. However, if you're doing a 16-8, if you're doing a daily restricted time eating, then it doesn't matter so much what you break the fast with. Now, I always like my women, especially perimenopausal, menopausal, to start the day with protein. And this is another important thing, because the digestive system actually works a bit better in the morning. The digestive system insulin sensitivity is higher in the morning. So a lot of people go into intermittent fasting thinking, oh, I'll just cut out breakfast. That's the easiest one. I don't feel particularly hungry in the morning, and it's much easier to have lunch and dinner. So I'll make my window 12 till 8, maybe, and then I won't eat, and all I'll have in the morning is lemon water. Okay, that can work for some people, but actually for menopausal women and people slightly older, I prefer them to have their window earlier. Maybe, if possible, have breakfast, lunch, early dinner. This is when, it comes down to the sort of eating dinner at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. If you can do that and then not eat. I know. It's always nice.
I'm not a late eater anyway.
It's just you've got to sort of sort it out with work and everything, haven't you? It's really, so if people can't eat at work and they're not getting home till 7-8 o'clock at night, it's that much harder. But the eating window, and this is something they've shown in a few studies where they restricted people to eating between 8 and 12, 8 a.m. and 12 midday, and then, or later in the day. So I'm kind of covering a lot of things here. So the time when you eat is important, and it can work better for older people if they have the window earlier in the day.
Mm-hmm.
What you eat, going back to what you eat, if you're doing it every day, then what you break the fast with is not so important. If you're doing a longer fast, if you're doing a 3 or 5 day fast where you're just having water or bone broth or something like that, then how you break the fast is important. I don't want people to go back to straight to a heavy meal. You've got to have something, maybe some stewed apples, some yogurt with berries, something that's a little bit easier to digest, because your digestive enzymes will have switched down a bit. So you need to break it with something like some cooked vegetables or something that's fairly easy to digest before you have a heavier meal.
So a softer fiber, effectively.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
And then with so you kind of touched on when. Do you know why your insulin kind of levels and your kind of sensitivity and everything else is higher in the mornings?
In the morning? Well, I guess, going back evolutionarily, we should feed when we wake up.
Yeah.
Because it sets you up for the day. Then you've got the energy to burn during the day when you're being active and all that. So I think the body, the circadian rhythm, our digestion just works. We're not really supposed to lie around at night eating a big dinner and munching chocolates until...
I can't do it. I don't know how people do. I'm not like, if I eat a late dinner, I'm in bed going, why did I do that?
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? You don't digest as well.
No,
Definitely.
you don't. I don't think you sleep as well either, because your body can't fully shut down.
No, that's absolutely right, because it's concentrating on digestion and everything's sort of slowing down for night. So it's never going to work as well.
No,
so if you think about it, it does make sense that actually get your calories in earlier in the day, then you exercise, work and whatever, and then slow it down towards nighttime.
What about exercising in a fasted state? What's your view on that?
Right. Yes. If you're doing the time restricted eating, where you're doing kind of not eating so much in the morning or whatever, it should be fine, but be led by your body. If you have decided you're not going to eat breakfast and then you go and do a HIIT class or something like that, you may not be able to manage. So you might need to leave that till later in the day. If you're doing a longer fast, 3 days, 5 days, something like that, absolutely no excessive exercise. It'll just stress your system way too much, and your body will think, I'm not getting any calories and I'm being forced to run a marathon or something. It will go into a stressed state. So if you're doing a longer fast, I get people to do a little bit of yoga, some stretching, really think about just flexibility,
active
and
movement,
gentle stuff. Yeah, much better for you.
So you mentioned around putting the body under stress and exercising, and obviously there's lots of different versions, but a huge part of stress is certain types of hormone production.
Yeah,
there are lots of benefits around intermittent fasting and for your hormones in particular. Can we talk a little bit about actually that side of it? Because hormones play such a big part to not just weight loss, but mental health, sleep, just general happiness, energy levels, well-being. And then when you hit menopause, there's going to be a lot of people kind of searching around for options, because the body changes, right? They're finding it harder to lose that kind of midsection weight, the visceral fat that we speak about. And that's the fat we need to be aware of a bit more, right? Because that's the one that can coat the organs and create kind of bigger health problems associated with diabetes and heart attacks and all these other kind of things. But what about the hormones? How does that work?
I think there are there's 2 or 3 main kind of hormonal areas that can be really affected by fasting, and stress is absolutely the key here. So when we go into a perimenopausal, menopausal state, what happens is we start producing more cortisol. Basically, the hormones that used to be made into estrogen and progesterone start going down the cortisol route more easily. Mm-hmm. So if you start introducing fasting at that time, it can be another stressor on the body. You've got more cortisol going already, so it might not be helpful at that point. So what I'm talking about there is like a 3 or 5 day, a real fast where you just have water or bone broth or something. Time restricted eating can be much easier for people because you can introduce it slowly. At the moment, I mean, most people are doing at least 8 hours overnight anyway. So just bringing your dinner an hour earlier when you can, or your breakfast a bit later, depending on what age you are or whatever, you can go into it very gradually, and the body doesn't find that as stressful. Also, something I found is that when women get to perimenopause, menopause, they're so fed up. They've put on 10 pounds of menopausal weight. They haven't changed anything. They think, oh, I'm just reducing. I can't have any fun anymore. I cannot have a glass of wine. I can't have a slice of cake. I will put on that weight immediately. Once they get into intermittent or time restricted eating and the weight does start to shift, things start coming off, actually their stress levels go down, because that weight gain is a stress mentally. Women are so fed, they're like, I can't get into my clothes anymore. I feel horrible. I feel frumpy. So it can reduce stress if you do it the right way. Time restricted eating can actually reduce stress. But let's go back to premenopausal women who are actually menstruating. Now, what's important here is that they have done research. If in the first week or so of a woman's cycle, before she ovulates, if you introduce severe calorie restrictions, so that could be a fast for a couple of days or cutting down your calories, she is less likely to ovulate. Now, if you think about it, your body is interpreting the fasting as, oh, you might be going into a famine here. This is not the best time for me to get pregnant, right? Preservation, it absolutely makes sense. So that can be a pitfall if you are trying to get pregnant. But if you think about it, for women who have bad PMS, endometriosis, things like that, they are now starting to think, hang on a minute, maybe some fasting can help here, actually, because it is reducing the hormones. So women during their period cycle, if they fast in the second half of the cycle, so they've already ovulated now, this is the the follicular phase, I think that is. No, sorry, the follicular phase is the first half, the luteal phase is the second half, isn't it? Right. If they fast in that side of the cycle, it may actually help with PMS and cravings and things like that. However, there's always a catch, isn't there? If you are somebody that really struggles with carbohydrate cravings, it may mean that you need more progesterone, and fasting just might make things even worse. So again, it comes down to getting help, getting somebody to guide you through this and say, these are my symptoms. How's this going to affect me? What's the best time for me to do it? Because those hormones will be affected. Finally, we've got things like thyroid hormones. The jury's out a bit there. Fasting can help actually stabilize thyroid hormones, or if you get it wrong, it can mess them about a bit. So it's a bit of a convoluted answer, but I think take what you individually have going on into account, maybe get some help from a nutritionist or a nutritional therapist to just find out what is the best one for you.
It's really interesting because, like I said right at the beginning, you know, it's got to be personalized to you, because there's so many things going on. Also it's what you're trying to achieve, right? Some people it will be for weight loss benefits and they don't necessarily have any underlying health issues. It could be there are people that actually have a lot of health issues, and so again, intermittent fasting is quite holistic in the sense that it can help with lots of different things. If you were to, so with your patients in particular, right, when you recommend intermittent fasting, what other things do you, what other things do you want them to do with it? How is it going to kind of fit in with everyday life? And what are you hoping to see when you ask someone to start intermittent fasting?
That fitting in with everyday life is absolutely crucial. That's when I talk about habits and ways to get it to work for you. But you're absolutely right. There are so many other things that are important. So we found that people cannot lose weight if they're not sleeping properly, if they're really stressed. I know people who go on holiday and suddenly the weight they sleep for 2 or 3 days and suddenly the weight starts to come off. So always with intermittent fasting, we've touched on the kind of food you're eating in the windows, whether you're doing time restricted eating or going on a fast for a few days. the type of food you eat when you eat is so important. You've got to curate that. You've got to make sure you're getting the right mix of proteins, carbohydrates, and essential fats, vitamins, minerals, everything you need.
What about
But
sorry, I'm just thinking while you're having a sip of water. Um, what about a calorie deficit within that window? Do you need to worry about that?
depends what you're doing it for and how
Yeah.
severely. So if you are trying to lose a bit of weight,
Fat, yeah.
then a couple of 100 calories is not a problem. It's when the body thinks you're really starving it that the metabolic rate suffers. So you've got to balance that deficit. You've got to make it a gentle deficit. I mean, yeah, if you want to lose weight, if you've got a goal in a few weeks' time and you're really going to starve yourself, you've got to accept that once you've got past that goal and maybe you've reached that weight, afterwards, your body is going to pile the weight back on as quickly as possible. It's going to glean every calorie it can because it wants you to get back to your set point, and it's worried that there's going to be another famine, starvation. So doing anything too quickly always has consequences. So having a calorie deficit, not a problem if it's just a gentle one and you're and also if you are doing that every now and then, you need a day of refeeding where you have some carbohydrates so the body thinks, oh, okay, I'm not starving. Every now and then I am going to get these carbs and things like that. So I quite like switching it up.
Yeah.
With people, keeping the body on its toes but not stressing it. It's called
So like bringing in
stretching. Yeah.
sweet potatoes, something with a bit like little, good carbs in a different
Oh,
way,
yeah.
but it's still natural sugars rather than
Yes.
going and having, I mean, you can go have McDonald's if you want, but I prefer a sweet potato over a McDonald's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and the sweet potato is also going to help your digestive system. It's going to
Yeah.
fuel the microbiome. It's going to give you some fiber so everything keeps going through the gut. So absolutely, we do need those carbs. And then we talk about other things. Okay, hydration, always key. My goodness, getting people to drink enough water is always the first thing
Especially in
that
the
I do.
winter.
Yes. When we got the air
Worse in the
conditioning or
winter.
heating, of course it is. We're in front of screens all day and we've got the heating on. Absolutely. So you've got to get people to drink enough water. I want them to sleep properly.
Mm-hmm.
Having enough sleep, as I mentioned already, and just sort of bringing stress down can affect your weight and help as much as fasting or anything like that.
How much sleep? There's
Well,
different views. Some people are actually saying, in some research I've been kind of reading as of late, that it's proven that 7 hours is the perfect amount, and anything over 9, you're actually oversleeping.
Well, I think there are general, again, it's a bit of a unique thing. I know people who need 9 hours to function, and I know people who need only 6. But, I was talking about that migrating motor complex in the digestion earlier.
Yeah.
There's a similar system in the brain, the glymphatic system. Basically, what happens when you enter really proper sleep, the blood vessels in the brain open slightly.
Yeah.
And again, the sort of hoovery thing goes around and cleans out metabolic wastes and toxins and stuff like that. So I think you've got to get at least 5 hours of sleep for that to happen properly. So either side of that, I think that's where they come to the 7-hour suggested window of what's good for people. And then, just talking to people, and they'll often say, it's like when you have a new baby or something, there's like a threshold of, when I can get 5 hours sleep, I can function, but below that, I just can't function. It is going to be slightly different, but I think that 7 hours is kind of the magic number, really.
So hydration, sleep, obviously
Yes.
good food,
Exercise,
but obviously not too intense. So if you're in that prolonged 3 to 5 water fasted state, then not intense exercise, but still active movement of some kind. What about weight training in a fasted state?
Weight training is fine if you can cope. I mean, be very much led by how you feel. If one day you've eaten something and you can lift a certain weight, and the next day you haven't eaten, and you just think, I just don't feel as strong. You've got to remember, okay, maybe I haven't got enough stores now, and I need to leave this until I've actually fed beforehand. So listen to your body. Don't just do something, got to get up at 5, got to do my weight training, do this, whatever. That's going to end up stressing you, and then you're going to get inflammation, and it's just not going to work. It's all about stretching the immune system and not stressing it. That's where the whole thing about hot and cold water therapy come in, the sort of cryotherapy or wild swimming. So intermittent exercise, I do like people to switch it up. If you're doing weight training one day, do some yoga the next, go for a walk to concentrate on your flexibility, your cardio. Also deep breathing and meditation. Again, that's kind of like an intermittent fasting for the brain, I suppose, and all the different systems. So that whole switching it up, which just stretches the immune system but doesn't stress it, is really important. So all those factors, as well as intermittent fasting, I like people to do.
Yeah. Anything else kind of on the other things that you ask people to do?
Okay, water. Well, it depends on what they're working on, really. If you are somebody with a thyroid problem or a digestive problem, I'm going to change what you're eating.
Let's assume they're perimenopausal,
Yes.
right? So their body's going through those kind of changes, and they're just trying to not stabilize a little bit, but achieve a little bit more zen, a bit more balance.
Yeah. Okay. So I am going to look at how much protein they're eating. I do find women tend to shut down on their protein consumption, and they go more towards vegetarian things, which can be fine, but actually there is the argument that you need more protein as you age. We find it harder to digest. So I look at their protein intake. I want to look at how well their gut is functioning. Past the age of 40, we start producing less digestive enzymes. So they might need supplementation there. They could be eating a really good diet and they're not absorbing it, which brings me on to what are you absorbing? I want to do a nutrient screen. I want to look at their levels of vitamins and minerals, things like magnesium, the B vitamins, iron, all these things can sort of slowly start to deplete. And we might need some supplements at that point because it's going to be too hard to get them from the amount of food, from the food that we're eating. So I'm going to look at supplements. Essential fatty acids, another big one. The fatty fish, unless you're eating mackerel and salmon every single day, omega-3, really crucial. So I'm going to look at what nutrients they have and what might need boosting. I'm also going to look at their digestive health because everything starts to slow down, unfortunately, going into perimenopause. It's amazing the effect that losing estrogen has, because it doesn't just make you fertile, it prepares the body for having a baby. So it looks after cardiovascular health, it looks after brain health, bone health. Once your estrogen depletes, you're less likely to have the replacement of the strong bones. So you need to make sure your vitamin D and your calcium and your collagen and all that are up because of the estrogen depleting. So going into perimenopause brings a lot of health issues up, and you've really got to keep on top of those.
It's hard, man. Like so you listen to it and you're like, come on. So effectively, estrogen. Well, I'm kind of simplifying what you've said, but estrogen. The reason why our metabolism and all these other things operate in the way they do is so we can have a baby. Is that in its simplest form?
In its simplest form, absolutely. That's what's going on from when you start having periods to when you finish. The estrogen, the progesterone, and the testosterone are keeping the muscles, the brain, the bone, everything, so you can produce another you.
Do our testosterone levels deplete as well when we're going into perimenopause? We always talk about estrogen going down and the impact of lack of estrogen, but actually testosterone plays a big part. Testosterone, actually, the best time to weight train is during your cycle, when you're on your period, because your testosterone levels are higher. So you can lift heavier, you actually have more chance of building muscle. There's lots of other benefits to it. We always talk about estrogen, but what about testosterone for women?
I know. I'm a big proponent of it. I take a little testosterone myself. That's been part of my whole sort of HRT makeup. Because you don't want to lose the muscles. The testosterone keeps your energy, your libido, your muscles. It affects, and you need tiny amount. But we don't think about that for women. And it's only in a few countries actually that they consider it as part of the HRT. And I think going through the NHS, you have to push a bit to get it in there. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's more expensive to produce or something. I don't know. But they don't think of it as much with women. Whereas for men, first thing they think of.
Yeah. What countries? That's what I mean. It's the whole like men testosterone, women estrogen, and it's like, well, actually, men have estrogen too.
Of course they do. Of course they do. And it often goes out of balance. You can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they even talk about, again, I was listening to a kind of a researcher the other day talking about how men's hormone levels change when they become parents. And their bodies still go through a change. They just don't necessarily know it because you don't see a massive bump appear. And, so it is really interesting. What countries do you think are more open to considering testosterone as part of it?
I think Western Europe is
Yeah,
possibly, but there are countries where they don't do HRT at all.
I know.
Or the most you're going to get is progesterone, like Greece, for instance. To be honest, I'm not so sure. I have opinions, but I don't have kind of
Yeah,
good
no, of
facts on
course.
that answer.
It's curious.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have I've got two questions actually in my head.
Yes.
If I wanted, so let's say for me, for example, if I wanted to start intermittent fasting, don't necessarily have any key medical conditions, there's all the different windows that you could do. Like you were saying, you've got your 16-8, you've got your 12,
Yeah.
there's so many different ones. How would I go about working out which window I should do? Or is it a case of actually starting easing myself in, and then actually if I find I can do it for longer, I should just do so? How does that work?
Ideal world, I think everybody would bring in some time restricted eating during their week to give their digestive system, their immune system, stem cells, etc., a chance to repair. So on days that you could do it, I would have dinner as early as possible and then delay breakfast a little bit, depending on when you're exercising. So you're not going to do that. Well, yeah. So I would, days that I'm not going out, working from home, things like that, I want to eat at 6 o'clock in the evening and that's it. And I give myself a nice break to the next morning. Ideal world, once or twice a year as well, I would get you to do a 3-day, a long weekend of either water or bone broth, a complete break. Reason for that
terrifies me.
I know, and I know you've got a young child. I mean, I used to do it twice a year, every year. I started sort of in my 20s and I discovered, I felt amazing. The first, you have to rest when you do it. This is the trouble. You have to rest. You can walk, you can take it easy, but you're not going to get a lot done over the weekend. But it can be a really nice weekend for just reading and relaxing and sort of hunkering down, a little bit of hibernation. And on sort of day 2 or 3, you just feel mentally clear. You feel detoxed. People can get a lot of withdrawals going into these.
I was just going to say,
yes.
like, I've done kind of when I've gone, I'm drinking too much coffee again, I need to kind of rein it back. I'd switch to decaf, or not have anything at all. And that first day, I'm like, God, I've got a headache, and I know exactly why it is. So you can get, and sugar withdrawals. So you have to it has to be a choice, doesn't it? You have to persevere.
You have to persevere. It's actually really important. The number of people that come back and they say, oh my goodness, I never realized caffeine had that effect on me, or sugar, or whatever it is. I mean, there is a reason for that whole hangry feeling when you're angry and hungry at the same time. It's a craving. It's affecting you mentally. It's your glucose levels going down and your body's like, hang on a minute, what's going on? Where's my usual stimulant? And so it can be a really interesting lesson for people when they realize, oh my goodness, that was affecting me. So maybe I won't go back to having so many coffees or whatever. But, like you say, you've got to be able to disappear. You've got to be able to hunker down for a few days. But the detoxification, it gives the liver that chance to go to find, it's like, those old toxins that I squirreled away in some fat cells, I can go and get those out now and process them. On it, the body starts to repair and detox far more than it can do during a regular week when you're eating all the time. There are sort of things it can get out and repair and deal with. So ideal world, once or twice a year. And I always think around spring and autumn are quite nice times to do it.
The week between Christmas and New Year in my head is a perfect time because no one goes anywhere.
That's true. If you can just lie down and kids kind of entertain themselves a little bit, and you haven't got that's an excellent time. If you can just say, right, mummy's done her bit, I'm going to go and rest for a couple of days. You guys are on your own. Forage for yourself. You're on your own.
So what about the daily ones then? So the short, so we do kind of 3 days twice a year.
Yes, 3 days twice a year. Day? And then during the week. And the thing is, don't beat yourself up. You've got dinners to go to. You've got work events. There are some days where it's just not going to be possible.
Yes.
But on days that you can, really think about reducing the window try and have your dinner early. Breakfast, bring it a little bit later. But again, if you're perimenopausal, menopausal, or you're working out first thing in the morning, I don't want that impacted. But yeah, try and give yourself that break during the week, because it really does help with digestion and immune system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has given me a lot of food for thought. One thing you haven't mentioned,
Yes.
drinking. We spoke all about food, but I think people make a massive mistake when it comes to intermittent fasting, that a coffee, the milk within that is still classed to your body as food. Or squash, or so when you're fasting, what can you drink?
Absolutely right. I'm really glad you brought that up. I've seen people write, oh, if it's under 50 calories, then it's fine. Or I'm like, well, where on earth did you get that from?
That's nonsense.
You're right. Exactly. Basically, the minute you put in a carb, a protein, a fat, your body is going to interpret it as food, and the migrating motor complex is going to stop, and you're going to switch into digesting mode. So it might be good food, but yes, if you get up in the morning and you have a matcha latte or something like that, you're switching into digestion mode. So what you can have, I think, is black coffee.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think it depends on perimenopausal as well, though. It depends. If you're perimenopausal, I don't think you can. Again, I'm not a practitioner. I'm just a nerd.
Well, no, it's wonderful that you're a nerd. You're not going to find the research, though, because how are they going to research that? That's the trouble. They might do something on mice or rats or something. But
some people say black coffee. But if you are like, I want to do this properly, is it just water? Lemon water? What?
Lemon. I was going to say a lemon water, a green tea, a herb tea. You'll be absolutely fine. There's no carbs, there's no fat, there's no protein in that.
Fruit tea?
So a fruit tea, yes, as long as there's not any sweeteners. I don't want any artificial sweeteners or sugar in there, and I don't want any honey with your lemon. So it really is just a herb or a squeeze of lemon into water. That's it, if you really want to do it properly.
Okay. Interesting. Because I think that's really key. A lot of people, when they're kind of looking at calorie deficit, they'll go, I don't understand. I've been so good. And, but then you go, you had 4 lattes yesterday. There's like 300 calories in those. So
oh my goodness.
And you just don't think about it. So a lot of the time, even when I'm talking to friends or whatever, I go, okay, don't tell me what you eat. Tell me what you drink. That's the first thing I say. I'm like, don't tell me what you eat. Tell me what you drink. And then they go, oh, I eat really well. Tell me what you drink. Oh, I'll have a large Starbucks here. What kind of Starbucks? Or I'll have a pumpkin spice latte with full fat milk. And I go, and how many of those do you have? Only 3. Okay, do you know how many calories are in that? That's your daily allowance done. So it's kind of, I think when people think about intermittent fasting in particular, it's anything you put in your mouth effectively. Your body can't differentiate. And I guess I'm looking for you to kind of, as the practitioner, go, no, this is correct. Like anything that goes in your mouth, your body can't differentiate between whether it's a food or a drink or this or that. It's a fat, a protein, a carb. Whatever a carb. So lemon water, green tea, bit of herbal tea, as long as there's no sweeteners, additives, sugar. And effectively that's it.
Effectively, yes, because as anything that's going to start the digestion process, that's the end of your
it stops your fast. Housekeeper going through, and I love that analogy. Love that analogy. So I, as always, absolutely love talking to you about this, and I could talk for hours because I am obsessed with intermittent fasting. I really think it's brilliant that it's getting the airspace it is. But why, for me, intermittent fasting, we always like to end podcasts on what's that one piece of advice you could give to people listening. We have a lot of marketeers and brand managers and people listening to this podcast. And the thing for me that was always really important was, how can we take these holistic topics and these other ways of thinking and kind of improve our consumer's life? And actually, the thing with me for intermittent fasting is, it just shows the mindset that your end customer is in, and the length that they will go to, and the kind of level of commitment they are prepared to put in to achieve that sense of well-being.
Mm-hmm.
If you could give a piece of advice to anyone listening about it, what would it be, do you reckon?
I think it's all about curation, isn't it? We spend a lot of time curating what we put into our minds, what we listen to. I for one, I get home from work and I'm already planning. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to watch Bake Off tonight, or something, because I know it's going to relax me, or I'm going to read this, or I'm really looking forward to that magazine in the bath. We curate who we talk to, what podcasts we listen to, everything we put in our mind. We think about it, the music we listen to, everything.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. What we don't curate so much, what we don't think about so much, is what we put into our bodies and when we put it into our bodies. So I think you're touching on something really important there. We curate what face creams we use, we curate what products we have around the house, but often when it comes to the body, we leave that till last and we leave it to chance. And especially as women, we look after everybody else first before we look after ourselves. So I think intermittent fasting is actually quite an easy way to improve our health without too much thought, without too much effort. It can make a big difference without any expense as well, unless you're going to start to buy the fasting mimicking kits, which cost a lot of money, but they work for some people, so I'm not going to knock it. So I think you're right. It's touching on, what are people prepared to do? This is easy. This is inexpensive. This is helpful. And it's all about taking self-responsibility, self-care. I mean, fasting doesn't sound like a self-care word, but actually it is, because you are looking after your health. So it's all about curating your health and giving yourself that break to actually repair.
And I think there's, do you know what, you're spot on. And I think there's opportunities for brands who are talking to, whether it's perimenopausal women, menopausal, even younger women, to actually curate on their behalf and give them that opportunity to think about it. Because you're absolutely, I'm listening to you talk and I'm going, oh my goodness, she is so right. If I think about what I've eaten this morning, because I've been running around versus all the other things that I've done today, you're absolutely right. It's an afterthought. It's this will do. And it's taking that time, and actually it should be the other way around. Absolutely should be the other way around. And I think that's where we have a duty of care as brands, talking to consumers. We have the practitioners, we have the experience, we have the insight and knowledge. We should be sharing that to ensure that they are seeing the results in the best way, because a happy customer is going to be a return one.
Yeah, completely. And it's bringing things from the inside out, isn't it?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. On that note, thank you so much, Sarah. I love talking to you as always. If you guys have any questions at all, please do get in touch at podcast@thepullagency.com. It's been the lovely Sarah and myself, Hannah, and we'll see you again soon.